We are on page 55 in chapter 5, which is natural law. What is obvious? Under the heading man-made law should be birthed from natural law. However, we're going to go back up to near the top of the page and then skip back down to the bottom. Government and laws written based upon the obvious, natural law and natural rights, is the happy medium between purge-like anarchy, which ultimately results in complete control of the weak by the strong, and that of Hobbesian authoritarianism to protect the lives of subjects. Down to the bottom. Thomas Hobbes had a point when he was discussing human nature. Our human nature betrays us. We lock our chests against the threat of someone else coming to take something out of them. We lock our homes when we leave them. We travel with companions, and we travel armed to defend ourselves against bandits. And while the idea of bandits accosting us on our journey may seem outdated, only the word and the mode of travel has changed. Hobbes' point is that we do not trust our fellow man. In fact, we do everything in our power to protect ourselves from our fellow man. In today's world, we not only have locks on our cars and doors of our homes, we have elaborate security systems with motion sensors, glass break detectors, cameras, and alarms. Our government officials, Hollywood and society elites, and music and sports stars even hire armed security to protect them at home or work and while out in public. And this doesn't even include armed security for businesses or gang leaders or that type of thing. Because even ordinary citizens, regular folks living in cities, wish to own firearms and even sometimes wish to carry them on their own person. Obviously, being city dwellers, this desire is not due to a leisure activity like hunting. No. Even ordinary citizens want firearms to protect their homes and their families and themselves. We do not trust each other. We see man as capable of great evil, and we have seen with our own eyes, if given the opportunity to perpetrate evil, there are many who will take it. So Hobbes, the advocate for absolutism, seems to be right. Hobbes argued that we created government to protect ourselves from the evils others want to perpetrate. But for an entity to protect every single subject, that entity must have the power to do so. Only an entity very powerful can claim to protect all its people. So the people create a government with power so concentrated so as to protect them from the dangers that would come from chaos and anarchy. This seems a reasonable argument. The survival instinct is strong. We know man is evil, so we turn to the absolute authority to help us survive. But the argument Hobbes makes is that we give up our rights and liberties in exchange for protection, but not necessarily protection from the government. It's like, you give us authority to rule over you and we might not kill you. But if you don't give us the authority to rule over you, your fellow man might just kill you. The reality is, however, that although we don't like to live under the threat of violence every minute of the day, or even worse, have our lives controlled by the bad guys just because they have guns and we don't, we also don't like our property and rights taken from us in order to limit the evil perpetrated against us. Natural law does not dictate tyranny, even for our own good, but liberty. But even Americans who pursue liberty understand the need for laws. If laws were not in place, how could we get justice for wrongs perpetrated against us? With a strong government in place, securing our lives and livelihoods and protecting us from outside threats, we have peace. And in times of peace, we can engage in activities that we could not engage in if we had no confidence in our own security. Could we plant fields and harvest crops if we were fearful that others might murder us in the midst of our labor or steal the fruit of it? Could we travel or engage in business transactions under the fear that we might be attacked or taken advantage of? Keep in mind there are seemingly non-violent crimes of which we are also afraid, like scammers calling grandparents, but not just that, contracts being violated by people more powerful than us, identity theft, white collar stuff. You kind of get the point. We're still afraid of it, and maybe rightfully so. I mean, because one's life can be upended at the point of a pen just as easily, if not more so, than at the point of a knife or even a gun. We've also seen instances where violence seems like an overreaction, yet is perpetrated anyway, like road rage incidents. I think what we are most afraid of, though, is the violence we never saw coming. Hobbes knew it takes quite a bit of power to secure what is necessary for a peaceful society. Thus, he argued we must hand over our rights to a government so they can have the power to maintain order and peace. But when we do this, outside the framework of natural law and natural rights, the sole arbiter of what is legal versus illegal, of what punishments should be handed out, of when peace and order has been achieved, of how much force is necessary to achieve peace and order, is the government. So the sole arbiter of all that is the government, the entity with the power over all its subjects' lives. The liberty tradition, based upon the framework of natural law, relies instead on the Lockean mindset of government having enough power to protect not the nation's safety or health, but individual rights, yet not enough power to take those rights away. How do you think the United States is doing there? Do you think that our government, the U.S. government, has enough power to protect individual rights? Do you think the American government, the U.S. government, has too much power to the point where they are taking those rights away? And so do you think that the government is holding its end up? Are they protecting your rights sufficiently? Or do you think they're infringing upon your rights more often than they're protecting them? Once the government breaks the contract and removes rights and curtails liberty, under Lockean principles, the people are obligated to protest. Peaceably, of course, because one person's freedom ends when it impedes on another person's life or liberty or property. Heading: Natural law is obvious. If protests should be peaceful, how can we tell whether an act is peaceful or violent? The answer is so simple: because it is based on natural law. We just know it when we see it. We innately know the difference between a peaceful gathering outside a courthouse and the burning of cars. We innately know the difference between a peaceful march through the city square and the breaking of windows. We innately know the difference between a peaceful sit-in and a mass looting. We innately know the difference between the peaceful civil disobedience of Martin Luther King Jr.'s civil rights movement and the beating of shopkeepers with a 2x4 and the murder of police officers. We may see man as capable of great evil, but that is only because, thanks to natural rights, birthed from natural law, it is obvious to us what evil looks like. We lock our homes and carry guns because we innately know stealing is wrong. We innately know violence is wrong. We innately know murder and rape and torture are evil. We know it when we see it, and we see it. Without a strong government preserving order, there is a risk of anarchy, chaos, rioting, looting, violence, and death. So the government needs to have enough power to write and implement laws and enough power to prevent or minimize illegal activity or crimes and to punish criminals. Because this is how the government protects the rights and liberties of the good guys, which is the legitimate role of government. Thus, even in the freest of societies, there are police officers and firefighters and a court system good citizens are all too willing to fund with their tax dollars. It is obvious that the presence of these protections is necessary and important to a free society. Such laws and public safety forces protect us and provide security, and that security provides the order necessary to engage in all the activities associated with individual liberty. It is the fence around the playground. It is the net at Top Golf. I think the American people, for the most part, see public safety officers and the laws in place as adequate to protect their way of life, protect their involvement in the market and society. Depending on where in the United States one lives, there's no great fear of that violence we never saw coming. However, now in 2024, with non-vetted migrants being bussed all over the country, housed in schools and hotels, overrunning the resources and support systems of more and more cities and regions, there are maybe those who before never worried about their daily safety who are now maybe a little more concerned about the future of their neighborhoods and safety of their families. Again, we will come back to some of this in part 2, but the question here is, has the Lockean system failed? Do we feel like our government is protecting our rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness and property? Or are these being trespassed upon by criminals more frequently than in the past? And should we be giving our government even more power to protect us U.S. citizens from these new criminals and criminal situations?